I do want to begin with that jobs report. For that, we're joined by Constance Hunter. She is the chief economist at KPMG, joining us from New York. Constance, it's great to see you. You can just unmute yourself so we can chat about these numbers here today. 701,000. And as I said, it doesn't fully capture because the survey period included March 12th. So that was the pay period. So Constance, what do you think the actual number looks like, and what are we going to see for the month of April, for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so heartbreaking, this data. We are expecting at least 8 million job losses for April, possibly closer to 12 million for the entire second quarter. We're looking at 25 million job losses. And what is so especially sad about this is that once workers become separated from their employers, it makes it much harder to restart the economy. So it's just all around a very sad and unfortunate situation.
Hey, Constance, it's Adam. Good to see you. I want to broaden
Hey,
this
Adam.
out with these really, none of us in our lifetime. It's been since the Great Depression we've seen these numbers.
No,
and
right. It's even worse because during the Great Depression, we didn't have a sudden drop off the cliff like this. This is so unprecedented. I mean, we have more social safety nets in place than during the Great Depression, but this is way worse than anything we saw in the Great Depression.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. It was May 6, 1935 that then President Roosevelt created the Works Progress Administration. Are we going to need that kind of government works program to get out of this mess?
That's a great question. I mean, we have many more social safety nets now than we did at that time, right? So we had we have unemployment insurance, we have food stamps, we have Social Security, we have Medicaid, Medicare. So a lot more in terms of social safety nets than at that time. And remember, at that time, it was an economic phenomenon that were driving the slowdown in GDP. This is a little bit different. We're seeing, obviously, a healthcare-induced coma on the economy, and that is interacting with the global financial market. So, of course, we're seeing strain there. The Fed, as lender of last resort, is coming in to try to ease constraints within capital markets. But, of course, there are a lot of firms that are very highly indebted, some of them in sectors that are especially affected. So consumer discretionary firms make up 17% of the high yield index. We see energy, which of course we see, as you mentioned, Julie, earlier, the fall in oil prices. Even with this increase, we're looking at below $30 a barrel. So very, very devastated industries and the knock-on effect. But it's a little different than the Great Recession because it's a sudden stoppage that's due to a shock rather than an erosion of economic conditions due to factors within the economy alone.
Constance, it's Rick Newman here. One of the crazy ironies of these job losses is this is actually what we need to get people to stay home and stop the spread of the virus, which is the precondition for restarting the economy. So if you look at those University of Washington projections for when the infections might peak and then start to decline rapidly, it shows that in some states that could happen around, let's say, May or the beginning of June. So if we get back to some kind of restart situation, let's say by June, is there any hope that a lot of those people will get hired back?
Sure. I think there's an important distinction to be made between the way we're handling this and the way some European economies have handled this. So in Europe, we have several economies that have basically said to firms, we will pay you to keep your workers home. So they will stay employed and they will stay so-called attached to their employer. So that when they restart, the firms simply call people back to work. The government stops paying their salary. The economy itself does the job that it's supposed to do in compensating people, and the flow of capital moves through the economy. And that is going to make a much easier restart and hitting that restart button than what we're going to need to do. So firms that have had to fire workers are probably going to go back to many of their same workers to rehire them. But of course, there will be some friction and some sorting as people maybe don't go back to the same employers, or maybe have been able to get temporary work during the crisis to hold themselves over and choose to switch jobs. So it'll just be a little bit more friction. So we do expect a restart, but we don't expect that restart to be as seamless as it could have been had people been able to remain employed at their existing employer.
And Constance, speaking all of that, the so-called Paycheck Protection Program starts today. And speaking of friction, we've had a lot of banks that have said, we're ready, we're already flooded with applications, but we've had some banks say, we're not ready yet. So we're already seeing examples of what you're talking about. So how does this affect that whole debate that has been happening among you economists about what kind of recovery this is going to be? Pick whatever shape you like.
So sure. I mean, and that's to be expected. It's a brand new program. It was for good reason pushed out very quickly, but it's understandable that it isn't maybe working 100% seamlessly. I think the problem is the gap between when firms had to start laying people off and when that money is available. And so many of our clients, for example, are larger firms, and they are doing everything they can, not only to retain their employees, but also to try to extend credit to some of their customers that may need it, even when they're not normally in the business of doing that. So I think you're seeing larger firms really that have the ability trying to smooth themselves over the situation, but other firms that are smaller, there was just a gap between when the government assistance started and when the crisis started. And I would say the other complicating factor is what I was alluding to earlier with regard to the debt capital markets. So firms that have seen a sudden stoppage aren't necessarily able to have the cash flow necessary to pay off debts and to service those debts. And so the fallout from levered firms really getting in trouble, I think, is where we see the biggest difficulty in restarting the economy once we're past the health problem.
Constance Hunter, thank you so much. She's the chief economist at KPMG. Stay well, Constance. It's good to see you.
Thank you, you too.
Remotely.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.